All right, everyone, we have reached Thursday. Just over 2 days to go until the big one, guys. We can waste another half an hour or so. That's what we do. We waste your time ahead of these big games. The good news today, guys, and you'll probably have seen this, there are a few other things we can chat about that will maybe take us away from the match itself, which I'd say in a weird way might not be a bad thing. Obviously we're going to speak about the game and come on to it, but there's a few other stories I think that are interesting enough to deserve a little bit of airtime. Tony, you're back. How are you getting on?
I'm fine. I'm very good. Did you miss me? Is that what you're saying in a roundabout way?
Ryan?
Trust me, when you do a two-man show, you really miss the third person in terms of getting your breath.
Ryan was calling you your full name yesterday, Tony. He was going, Tony Haggerty.
Oh, wow. I get
Yes, giving you your full title, Tony,
It's
first of
funny
his
when-
name, etc.
I mean, obviously, I'm used to it now, but when I used to get bylined in the paper and they put Tony Haggerty, my mother used to go mental. Your name's not Tony, it's Anthony. Tell them. The Sunday name. She wanted the full Sunday moniker. And I would say to guys, can you put my full name like Tony? Sometimes it's too many letters.
Yeah, you can't fit it in.
It's coming from my mother, so just you want to upset her. Keep calling me Tony, but it's something I'm used to now. So, full Sunday name was it, Ryan? Thanks very much. That's very kind. Appreciate that.
No bother. Yeah, I was giving you your full and proper title. Yeah, absolutely. I can't even remember doing that, to be honest. It must have been
It's great chat, this, guys. Great chat 2 days ahead of the derby.
Oh, you can tell we're linked with Liam Kelly of Motherwell, can't you?
Yeah, that's one of the stories we're going to chat about. First of all, big thanks to MPH Boilers and Weissman for sponsoring this video. They've teamed up, and when you choose a Weissman boiler installed by MPH, you'll get a free internet controller, guys, and they're offering the full year's service for free. So this is your big chance to get world-class engineering with local expert service through Weissman and MPH Boilers. Make sure to check them out and take the first step towards a warmer, more efficient home. Get this still going.
Certainly still do. 6 months of access for a full £1 plus £1 plus a free Kyogo Furuhashi print from renowned football artist made by Frankie. I said it before the last derby. Hopefully he can get to the total the number that's on his back by the time the weekend comes. Hopefully he can maybe get to 9 or 10. I was speaking about that on another podcast last night. Yeah, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. On there this morning, there is a piece from Stuart Ross identifying 3 experienced centre-backs that Celtic could pursue that are within the 24 to 26 age bracket that could do a job alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers next season, because as much as Liam Scales has signed a new deal, I think most Celtic supporters and people that follow Celtic will be wanting a second choice centre-back to be playing alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers next season. So, those 3 players, it's a very insightful read if you're looking for a wee bit of a scouting piece. He's had ones on left backs recently. He's also had ones on goalkeepers too. So it's always insightful by Stuart. www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, and that is on the top of the website.
You get anything going on at the moment, Tony, article-wise? Anything in your mind? I guess your mind's just constantly going with this kind of stuff.
Well, I was talking to you off air, wasn't I? And I'm thinking about writing about generational Celtic Rangers games now. The older generation, I've alluded to this one before, 79, 10 men won the league against Rangers. I think that's a generational football match. My old man still says it's the best ever Celtic Rangers game he's ever been to. And I was thinking for your generation, I was thinking the Ange Postecoglou 3-0 game, and I think that those two are quite pivotal. You mentioned the 6-2 game as well, Mark Laniel. Maybe people of my generation, because I was born, I was 6 years old, 79. Just didn't remember it. I think those two in particular, I think if Celtic can produce something, and I just think the music getting into those two is kind of a bit similar, Celtic had the chance to win the title against Rangers that night. They had the chance to go top of the league and never look back the night Ange Postecoglou's team destroyed them. And I just think that it's that kind of, that energy channeling that kind of thing. I was thinking about there's something in that. So, that's on my mind. It's up there somewhere. It just needs to come out. I kind of know what I'm thinking. I just need to write the words now, So, but yeah, I just think there's a chance for Brendan Rodgers' Celtic team to do something special, and it'll be remembered, as I say, for generations to come. And we spoke about the 5-1 game and the 5-0 games at Celtic Park, but I think there was a kind of air of expectancy about that when Celtic were being invincible and beating Rangers repeatedly in Brendan Rodgers' first spell. So I just think this one can be a kind of generational game as well. Could be wrong in that, but certainly it's my mode of thinking at the minute.
I think you make a lot of good points, and I think the general feeling is one of nerves probably at the moment. Certainly, that's how I've been feeling. But I caught myself earlier just imagining how good the next week could be if Celtic turn up, especially on Saturday, and win that game. We're going to have one of our most favourite Celtic games, I think, if the team turn and win up with everything that's on the line, and then a couple of days later, 3 or 4 days later, we'll have the chance to win the league at Rugby Park, assuming things go well on Saturday. And then a few days after that, you'd be getting the trophy at Celtic Park. And then a week after that, you'd have the chance for a double at Hampden. Like, that's all there for us over the next 2 and a bit weeks. It's going to be amazing. And it all starts on Saturday. If the team win that game on Saturday, I kind of feel like everything else might fall into place, certainly in the league it will. Just quickly, Ryan, what would your favourite game against Rangers be, either pre or post 2012, of course?
There's so many different ones that come to mind. It would probably be either the 3-0 or the 4-0. Both were under Ange Postecoglou. I think the 4-0 game in which Jota scores the dink is so underrated now, because the 3-0 still gets talked about. There's a sort of mystique about that game, the way the green haze was around Celtic Park, the way that Celtic needed, or that if Celtic won, they would be back on top of the table, and they never really looked back at that point. But the 4-0 game for me was every bit as good. Yes, it wasn't at night, but that was a real statement of intent. Between those two games and, the game with Gordon Strachan, Nakamura scores and then Jan Venegura Hesselink header. I wasn't at that game personally, but even though I wasn't as into football as much as I am just now, you could tell, you could understand the magnitude of what was happening. And in the game after that against when Barry Robson scored the penalty, I know I've named about 4 there, but they're all different for different reasons. I just like Celtic winning against Rangers, is basically what I'm trying to say, long story short. And the good thing is I've experienced that quite a bit, and hopefully that is the case once again on Saturday afternoon. But if I was to pick a favourite, it probably would be that 3-0 game under Ange Postecoglou. It was a real tidal shift, I'd say, between the two sides. Hatate had just burst onto the scene. Matt O'Reilly had burst onto the scene as well. Callum McGregor with the mask. Juranovic with the comments to Borna Barisic. So many big moments in that game. Not even talking about the goals, 3 brilliant goals. But, some of those individual moments, it was a real tidal shift for Celtic. So I'd probably put that down as my favourite.
You're talking about underrated games. We beat Rangers 5-0 to win the league, to seal the league, and nobody really ever talks about it. It's so bizarre to me. That would be right up there for me. That day, obviously, Brendan Rodgers managing us. Going back, the 2-1 win over them. My first ever one was the one when Sean Maloney scored that kind of long range goal in the League Cup in 2005. It would probably be, and even that one was amazing. Tony, what would your number one be?
Oh my goodness! Yeah. Wow. And do you know what? And because you mentioned it, probably because it's the first game I covered as a journalist. It was a 6-2 game, and I was there as a working professional, and I just sat there and I was just like, wow. It's just like, wow. I remember being slapped in the back of the head by a fellow journalist at one point. And I turned around and he went, "You are allowed to enjoy it," because I just sat there, frozen stiff, typing and showing no emotion. It's actually the best and the worst place to be, because you can't do anything other than just sit there and write. Celtic are 3-0 up in 11 minutes, and you're thinking, we're going to we're going to crush them here, and your insides are just
Yeah.
doing the silent screaming, the Edvard Munch, and then when they won at the end, it was just, they weren't never not going to win that game, and then Larsson's goal, and your jaw. I think the only thing
Yeah.
I did was my jaw dropped when Larsson scored, and I just kind of went, and I think I turned around and I just said to somebody, "That's a thing of beauty," and so I went, "I'm taking that," it's like, well, it is, and I think that's the only emotion I showed, and I think that's only natural because you're a Celtic supporter. I think you were caught up in that moment as a working professional and as a journalist and just as a supporter watching that unfold. So that for those reasons, that would be my favourite. As in games I attended as a spectator. At Ibrox, it would be Paul McStay's goal in a 2-1 game centenary season. Just a brilliant atmosphere. That was incredible. It was wonderful. And at Celtic Park, my goodness, there's been that many, hasn't there? So it's just it's hard to kind of narrow down. But just because certain things, I mean that centenary season, I was 16 and I never missed a football match home and away. So that whole season meant everything to me. So the Billy Stark goal that won at 1-0. Love Billy Stark as a player. And then the 2-0 game at New Year. So that there's loads, but I just think every once in a while, you have kind of once in a generation games, don't you? People still talk about 79. They will talk about that Ange Postecoglou 3-0 game from now until Doomsday. So I just think there's certain ones that have more meaning to the Celtic supporters than others. As you say, the 5-0 game, nobody ever really talks about that. It's funny, that, isn't it? It's just weird the way it works.
Probably my favourite ever Celtic goal, or one of my favourite ever Celtic goals, and celebrations as well, because the goal to make it 2-0 was already getting celebrated, or it was still getting celebrated by Edward. Forrest then decides to take a shot from distance. The fans are still on their feet as it's scored, so it's like a double celebration, not unlike Abada's one to make it 3-0 on the night. I love those celebrations in which you've not fully finished celebrating the second goal and the third one goes in. It's even bigger for some reason. But that 5-0 game, I think people are just a bit annoyed that it wasn't more than 5-0 because I think they took the foot off the gas in the second half.
Amazing.
Brendan Rodgers was funny, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Brendan
I mean, as you say, it was 5-0 after 50 minutes. But I mean, we still won 5-0. It's funny when you talk about the 6-2 game, and alongside obviously 1967, that would be the ones that I'm really envious of people that were at, and I really wish I'd have been into Celtic at that stage and able to go to that game and also enjoy it and feel everything, etc. Because I always think about that Paul Lambert goal and just the delirium inside the stadium, and I always kind of hoped we'd get a moment like that further down the years to feel what those people felt inside that stadium that day. And as Ryan says, I'd actually forgotten the James Forrest one, but that was probably a moment that gave us that feeling. Definitely the Abada goal in the 3-0 game, and Abada as well in the 4-0 game to make it 3-0. So we've had it 3 times since then, and that feeling of like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever in life to be absolutely hammering this mob. Imagine if we get a similar start on Saturday. I mean, it would just be amazing. Just got a few ones. Patrick bringing up Joe Ledley's one. Glasgow's in the midst of a storm. I remember being chat that day about the game potentially being off. I think part of Celtic Park had something to do with the roof or something like that. Helen bringing up James Forrest. Maestro talking about the Brunei 2-2 Scottish Cup game at Ibrox. The return game was the Mark Wilson one, of course, the replay. And Seamus talking about the 6-2 Henrik's best ever goal. Fascinating stuff, guys. Should we chat just a wee bit about the stories that came out last night? Report saying that we've placed Motherwell goalkeeper Liam Kelly on a hit list of targets for the summer. It seems like obviously Joe Hart's going to leave the club. Seems like Ben Siegrist will be off skate as well, and Kelly, who's out of contract at the end of this season, may be someone we're looking at. Now immediately I think people jump and go, Joe Hart's replacement, can't have that. While I wouldn't ever rule anything out with Celtic transfer wise, I'm assuming this would be as a replacement for Ben Siegrist. Kelly would tick the homegrown UEFA quota box. As I say, would cost us nothing. Is this one we should be pursuing, Tony? Are you a fan of it? Are you against it?
I like to think he's one of a number of goalkeepers on our list, as opposed to Celtic's number one target to replace Joe Hart. I haven't watched Kelly in, in deep form, and in terms of every time we've played him, I've been aware of him having a stormer. So I can't really comment on his abilities or not. I think everything else is Celtic. If he's on some kind of list, then Celtic see merits in him. But I'm like you. If that's the case, then I would be hoping that it would be this kind of backup to somebody a wee bit more special and better. That's just my own personal thought. I've no feelings towards Kelly, good or bad, because I've not watched enough of him to think or to form a sound judgment. I don't have enough, matches to go on. When he plays against Celtic, but I'm not really looking at him. I'm looking at things going by him most of the time, not shots that he's saving, that kind of thing. So yeah, as I say, I'm with you on that one in terms of hopefully it's to replace somebody like Siegrist and maybe can manage back up to somebody with a bit more quality than somebody of Joe Hart's ilk.
Yeah, I'd assume it would be. I mean, it must be looking at a kind of Siegrist replacement. And with regards to that, Ryan, if Siegrist is to move on, you're, as I say, the European homegrown type stuff as well, Kelly would tick that box. Ironically, for his time at Rangers coming through. What's your thoughts?
If it's the number 2 or the number 3, then fine. I don't personally rate the goalkeeper that much, if I'm being honest. I've watched him over a number of seasons. He can put in good games. I've seen good games from Liam Kelly. I've also seen really bad games from Liam Kelly where it looks as if he can save something and it doesn't get saved. I know for a fact that there's some Motherwell fans that aren't happy with his performances this season, even though he's in and around the Motherwell team. Was talking, or I seen a Motherwell fan tweeting the other day saying that he can't wait for Kelly to move on in the summer. So maybe he just needs a scene change or a new home, a new place to call home or whatever. Fine with it being number 2 or number 3 because we've got Scott Bain sitting there that's hardly playing at all, and he ticks a box. Liam Kelly would tick a box due to being Scottish, due to being homegrown. But in terms of the number 1, I'm fine with Liam Kelly being the supposed safe pair of hands, while Celtic bring in a younger goalkeeper to nurture and give that opportunity and give them a clear run of games from now, from next season until a few more seasons down the line. I don't think he will be the number 1 choice because he's not as good a goalkeeper as Hart. I'd say Joe Hart's a better goalkeeper than Liam Kelly, and Celtic have got to be in the business of improving their starting lineup. I think if they bring in Liam Kelly as the number 1, they'd be downgrading on what they've already got currently. I think he'll be a second or a third choice. Good for the homegrown quota, but I think Celtic will spend a bit of money on a proper number 1 goalkeeper this summer. Just depends on who that is, to be honest.
Ross bringing up Toby Oluwayemi. Is he better than Oluwayemi can be? I get the sense that Oluwayemi might not be up to a great deal. From what I've heard from some of his loan spells, I think he was at Cork City, was it, last season?
Cork City, yeah.
He wasn't even really playing with them. He started as their kind of first choice keeper and faded. I'm not sure. I feel like maybe a couple of years ago people were looking at him as being the future number 1. Potentially, personally, I just don't see it there. And Pete saying they signed Butland, who single-handedly saved them multiple points and kept them in the title chase. So why can't we source a top keeper? Again, I think the club are going to look to do that. It may just be that you need to operate with more than 2 kind of goalkeepers, because if it is just Bain and a new keeper, who else is there really at the club? You'd probably be looking at the development team or whatever. Anything else to say on Kelly, guys, or do you want to just move on to the next bit on the scouting?
I think there's a more interesting story to come with the scouting, to be honest, especially if you know your history, or if you know people's history on Twitter, etc., on certain people. Yeah, Kelly's. I think we'll get linked with a lot of goalkeepers this summer. It just seems like 2 and 2 put together. There's going to be a list of goalkeepers. I don't think Liam Kelly isn't the first name that we've seen linked with Celtic. He certainly won't be the last. I think it's going to be a long summer in that regard. Hope it's not a long summer because Celtic need to have a goalkeeper in before pre-season, in my opinion, just to get used to his surroundings, because he will be the first choice. I think they'll sign more than one, to be honest.
Yeah. This other story, so we know that Mark Lowell, head of recruitment, departed the club at the start of March. Joe Dudgeon, who was also part of that recruitment team, left to pursue new opportunities. The report last night also said that we've now brought on board South American specialist Mark Cooper. Brendan Rodgers said to be a fan. I think Rodgers spoke about him a couple of weeks ago at that Q&A did with some supporters. And interestingly enough, the tweet that Ryan refers to was one from 2015, August 2015, with Mark O. Cooper, he is on Twitter, tweeting about Federico Valverde of Peñarol under 16s at that stage. Now, Valverde obviously plays for Real Madrid now. The tweet's been getting quoted like mad, Tony, and people saying this guy, for years Celtic need to hire him, he knows what he's talking about. And now we have hired him. So are you a man to get drawn in by names like Valverde? What do you make of this?
My initial thought was, if Brendan Rodgers wants him and Brendan Rodgers has been given him, then I'm happy about that. But they're actually listening to the manager in terms of getting people like Mark Cooper on board. The proof's in the pudding. We shall wait and see. He has some kind of track record, doesn't he? So that's fine. But I know Valverde's playing for Real Madrid. So now go and find us the next Valverde or players of that ilk. Please do that, because Celtic scouting in South America recently and in the past has left a hell of a lot to be desired, hasn't it? You know who I'm referring to. And so if Mark Cooper can sort that out, and he's somebody who Brendan Rodgers was keen to have on board, and we now have him on board, then I'm all for that. But, you're only as good as the players that you recommend. And if you can recommend a couple of gems, then yeah, that's great. But he has to now prove his worth, doesn't he? The Celtic, if the manager has fought for him and wants him to be part of that staff and part of that team and part of his expertise in that particular locale in the world, then so be it.
It was interesting because I searched for Mark Cooper's tweets containing the word Valverde, and he tweeted another time about Valverde and another player as well. And just to kind of, for interest's sake, I looked up that player who would have been the same age, 16, 17, and back in 2015 to see what he'd done with his career. And he hadn't fared quite as well. Let's just say he's not playing with Real Madrid. I think he's still in Paraguay or wherever and has been there his whole career. So I guess even that tweet, as much you get drawn in by this one about Valverde, that's clearly an incredible spot 10 years ago to have found a player playing for the under 16s in a team in Uruguay who's now one of the best midfielders in the world. You don't get them all right. It's clear Celtic are going to be looking at South America. Ryan, are there players to be found there? Because, Blake just commented there saying, have we ever had a successful South American? And I must admit, I can't think of one.
Not any South Americans, maybe Central America, North America with Honduras, with Zagiri. But apart from that, Palma to an extent, although I think the jury is very much still out on him. See what he can do next season. There are players to be found there. It's a massive continent. Brazil could be a continent in itself. Get Argentina, loads and loads of different places. I think there was also a thread that went about a year ago or so. Then he had a list of names that he gave over to Celtic, and I think Moises Caicedo was on that list as well before he went to Brighton. Brighton are the benchmark for Celtic, in my opinion, of finding these South American talents. They've got to be shopping in the same areas that Brighton are, because look at the profits that they've had since they've brought in players from Argentina, Brazil,
Asia,
all these. Yeah, absolutely. There are players. It's a massive continent. I just think that people are a bit worried because there's players that have been in and around those areas that haven't fared as well for Celtic in the past. Bernabei being one of them. People will look at that as the most recent example and say, oh, don't sign players from there because they'll all be like Bernabeu. You can't trust it. Is that like if that was the case for European players, Celtic wouldn't have half of their great exports because of that. They've just got to trust the system, and if it's going to be a better organisation with the scouting in South America, then they might find their next star. I think it was Andre Santos that was linked as well. That was one of the tweets that was going about when I looked him up last night. That's currently at Chelsea. That went for quite a bit of money. He's not made his debut for Chelsea, but if you know anything about Chelsea, you know that they've got 6 or 7 young Brazilians on their books at the club that are going to be making their way into the first team over the next 3-4 years. They've signed them up and stockpiled 16, 17-year-olds that are going to eventually make the move to Chelsea. Half their team could be Brazilian at one point because they've signed so many youngsters. I think they're close to signing another one as well, another young one for about 55 million euros. So Celtic won't be in that ballpark, but they've got to find like-minded talent that have maybe not made that breakout yet, but they're showing it maybe in their unders teams, their under 16s team, under 18 team. Talent's there, you've just got to spot it and find it. And if it's more organised on that in that regard, then Celtic have got a better chance of finding these gems when they do arise.
Yeah, Steve
and
talked
Cecil
about
as well, yeah.
in Cecil, he scored that great goal against Man City. See my issue I have with this, like you talk about Chelsea there and Brighton to a lesser extent. Can these teams not afford to take a chance on players like that, knowing that they're going to be able to sign loads of other players, and if it doesn't work out, then you still get your points, almost a bonus. And I would maybe Brighton are slightly different. Certainly Chelsea sign these players, and if they don't work, they just loan them out, and they end up making their money and more back anyway. Whereas with Celtic, these players we sign kind of have to make an impact. Yeah. Am I being really daft here? Is it too much of a risk sometimes? Should potentially we be looking at markets in Europe maybe that are closer to home? I mean, we've had a lot of success in Scandinavia over the years, like Poland and places like that, Central Europe, even Eastern Europe. Am I being a bit naive there or close-minded or however you want to say, Tony?
Nah, you're not being close-minded, but you have to say that Mark Cooper's remit will have to be to find, a polished article, a gem that Celtic can polish, basically, but they have to hit the ground running. Celtic can't be shelling out X amount of millions on somebody that can't work or won't work or doesn't fit the system. So, and I think if Brendan Rodgers trusts him, then that's good enough for me. But it has to work. They can't be any more money, frittered down the drain on players. And Valverde and Cecil, he's got a great track record for other clubs. He's now working for Celtic. So we want that record to transpire to Celtic now and to say, right, here we go. But we need to be sure, because I'm sure he'll throw a list of players. You said there that you checked another player out at the time of Valverde. He's not doing so well. So it would be Celtic's luck they would end up with somebody like that, wouldn't they? That kind of thing. So this has to be bang on the money whenever Mark Cooper's going to recommend players. I like the fact that we are going to explore South America, because there are, as we've seen throughout history, wonderful footballers there. It's a land of wonderful footballers, isn't it? So, but the strike rate has to be good. I'm not saying it has to be perfect, but it has to be good. Celtic really need to do their due diligence on these kind of transfers and make sure that whoever's coming in can hit the ground running and offer you something. And, you're talking about European markets. I just think Brendan's getting these kind of building blocks in place now, isn't he? And I think they are going to try and get the best people to come in terms of recruitment and take Celtic to another stage. I could be wrong in that, but I just feel that there's a kind of sea change that Celtic can get this title over the line, and you'll see a different way of approaching transfers, different way of approaching recruitment, and a different way, and different people coming in, and everybody have their area of expertise. That's my thinking.
And there's so much to recruitment as well. Like, let me pose a question. See and I know I can already see the answers coming in here in the chat once I say this, but see the players we've signed this year, have they, I'm talking generally here, I'm not talking specifically, have they been bad signings, or have they come into a team that hasn't been playing as well as they did the last couple of seasons. Basically what I'm saying is, if we'd have signed a lot of the players we signed this season, maybe last season or the year before, would we have got greater results? Like, there's more to it than just the player you sign. It's the team they come into, the environment they come into. I think Celtic are going to be a lot stronger next season. I just think this year there was a lot going on. I think there was a huge hangover from the previous manager. I think, as you say, Tony, Rodgers is starting to get stuff together. I think regardless of whether we win the league or not, Brendan Rodgers is going to be around next season.
Yeah.
Hopefully we do win the league. I think we will. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's all about the environment they come into as well, rather than not just their player.
It's got to be a good fit. It's got to be, and that's half the battle, is getting the player, and then they settle as well. I think there's more of a likelihood of signing players from Scandinavia and Central Europe, Eastern Europe, whatever, because it'll be a better fit for the player because it's easier to adapt. Whereas if you come from South America, it's a completely different culture change. You know, time differences, temperature differences as well. But it's about time that Celtic tackle this market, because it's a market that's thriving. Again, look at Brighton, look at the South American players. I just looked up there, and Cecil's only 20 years old, and he's playing Premier League football every single week. These players are there to be found. Celtic just need to probably find them a bit earlier than your Benficas, your Brightons, Porto, Sporting Club. That's difficult because those scouting networks are already set in place. It's difficult in Africa to do that as well, because the Red Bull teams are all over Africa. They've got their scouting systems. North Island as well have got the Ghanaian Right to Dream Academy as well. All of these are well established, and Celtic are new in making these scouting networks, so it's going to take time, but it's a good step forward if Celtic are doing this. I think it's an interesting move. South America is definitely a place that's got to be targeted alongside Africa, in my opinion, because there's players there. You've just got to look at what Brighton are doing. Brighton have got players from all different continents, you know, Matoma from Asia and Cecil from South America, European players, African players too. I want Celtic to be the same and getting the best players from each continent, or the best young players, because in the end, Celtic will make profit on these players as well. And I know you want Celtic to be an attractive proposition for these players. Brighton definitely is, Chelsea is now to an extent too. I want Celtic to be one of those landing spots for these players to ply their trade and really make a name for themselves in the European game. If that's the case, then Celtic will be doing quite well. But I'm quite excited about this. Hopefully Celtic do tackle South America just that wee bit more and find some gems.
It's going to be very obvious if we do that it's going to be his signings.
Yeah, and that's why winning this league is so important, Hamish, because that's a real carrot that you can dangle in front of players. Instant access to the Champions League, because as you say, it's hard to compete against the likes of Brighton. You know, the English Premier League sells itself to any player. So, but you have to, you know, the great thing about this is Celtic now established these kind of scouting network is you can sell them something, you know, young hungry players, and also sell them the fact that, okay, if the English Premier League is your be all and end all, come to Scotland. You know, it's a stepping stone to that, if that's part of your plan. You know, and I think a lot of players could see the benefit in that, coming to a club like Celtic and developing, you know, their skills and their talent, having a good 2 or 3 years, like Matt O'Reilly, you know, somebody like that who might leave at the end of this season. Hopefully he stays, but he's flourished in 3 years. And become the player that we all love and would be loath to part with, but we would understand, because he's been nurtured and he's developed into a fantastic footballer. So that's what we have to do with the gems coming from South America. As I say, get some kind of gem and we polish them up and then send them elsewhere with our best wishes. But as long as when they come, when they hit the ground running and they give us however many years of sterling service, and we will thank them for that and take us to where Celtic want to go as well in the process. And I think that's part of the whole new thinking with this new Champions League setup, that Celtic just don't want to be in that. Some also runs, they actually want to go in and compete, and I think it's all part of the new strategy that I'm referring to, with bringing in players from here, there and everywhere to fit in and make inroads and impacts in Europe, because I think that's Rodgers' big managerial bugbear at the minute that a club like Celtic haven't, and I think he wants to readdress that.
I also think, just looking at it, we can't get obsessed with this idea of buying, 19 to 22-year-olds. You look at it and polishing them and selling them on. I think doing that for a few players a year is a good idea. It brings some youthfulness. They've obviously got that high potential. You look at some of the most successful signings we've had over the past 3 years. A lot of them have been 27, 28 or older. Off the top of my head, Yakimakis, Juranovic, Kyogo, or he might have been slightly younger, Joe Hart, Aaron Moy. These players have come in not with any real resale. Okay, we made a bit more for Juranovic, but not as much as we would have made for the younger players. But these players helped Celtic to be successful. And a few people, Blake saying, John saying, how many will start on Saturday? Hamish, there's your answer. I was thinking about this earlier. I think there's a fair chance we have no signings from this season in our starting lineup on Saturday. Which is, a damning indictment.
Tells you
Blake
go.
saying,
the overall Oil isn't going to be at the club anymore.
Yeah,
it's
going to be interesting.
I think the thing, it's all about finding that happy medium between good young players and experienced players. Every good team in world football has that mix. They've got the mix spot on. They've got they've got young players mixed with the experienced pros that will get them over the line. I just hope that they can get that happy medium between the two players, between the two age ranges.
I also think Brendan's all over this. Like, what happened in the summer won't ever happen again whilst he's in charge. And the recruitment team will get it as spot on as they can. There will be due diligence done. There will be signing experienced players, Hamish, or 26, 27 guys like that. The odd gem from South America or Asia might come in as a youngster. I'm talking maybe 1, 2, 3 tops who they think can maybe go straight into the first team, and maybe that's an overestimate, but certainly he's all over this, because I don't think, now as you said there as well, that nobody will come into this Celtic team without his season. They will be his players, having been so sourced by that network that he's putting up, that he's in building blocks that he's putting in place. Mark Cooper being one of them, and whoever comes in as the head of recruitment. They'll all be in this together.
Yeah. If we win the league this season, it won't be down to signings we've made, maybe Adam Ida apart. It'll be down to players who are already there, and we'll have got away with one. Let's face it, if we win the league, given how bad our transfer windows have been, has to be better next season.
Definitely does.
Down to the manager as well. Down to the manager as well, being able to guide that group.
100%. 100%.
I'm not saying it's our
to be honest, I'm not as worried.
When he goes out, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about next season. I know this season still to be finalised, but I just think a lot of the teething issues that have been present in the first season won't be there in the second season. Everybody will be bought into what Brendan Rodgers is doing. I think the signings will be better. I'm really looking forward to next season already. Looking forward to seeing what Celtic can do in both the Champions League and the transfer window. It's going to be an exciting summer in that regard. I'm just hoping that their scouting is good. They can't go no half measures in this. They've got to go. If they're going to bring in good young players, then pay good money for these good young players that are going to make a difference, rather than trying to go for bargains and hoping that they succeed. Pay that extra couple of million and make sure that they're good young talents that are coming in. And for the experience, got to find that happy medium between the two.
Yes. Right, happy to leave it there for now, guys. We barely even touched on a certain match that's happening on Saturday. One final shout out for this offer: 6 months of access for £1 for the Celtic Way, and if that's not enough, you get a free Kyogo Furuhashi print from a renowned football artist made by Frankie thrown in as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Ryan, you won't be on, but I believe Kevin maybe joining us. I don't know if I should have said that. There's now pressure on Kevin to definitely be here. If not, it'll be me and you, Tony, but we hope Kevin's with us to look ahead to the big game, and we will be discussing just the game tomorrow. Thanks everyone for tuning in, watching, etc. Catch you this time tomorrow.